Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to your new favorite sports show, GameClock. Tonight, we're going to be going over my Week 1 predictions and how wrong or right I was. Tonight, we're going to be going over my Week 1 predictions and how wrong... Accidentally had my stream in the background. That's embarrassing. Regardless, we're going to be going over my Week 1 predictions and also over my Week 2 predictions looking forward, and I'm excited to talk a little bit about one of the best catches of this first week, along with the awesome story behind it during halftime. So, as always, whistle blows. Let's start the game clock. 1 second. Start the game clock. Okay. Well, actually, apologies. We're going to quarter one. We got the graphic from last week. So, as you can see, the graphic on this side has all of my predictions for week 1. Now, I did this after the Eagles and Cowboys already played, so that one was guaranteed to be right. First game, right while I was streaming my last game clock stream, I was incorrect. The Chiefs lost to the Chargers. The Chargers looked very strong as they played against the Chiefs. The Chiefs losing Xavier Worthy, I think, hurt them a lot. I think that their defense did not look strong. Justin Herbert played out of his mind. They looked fantastic. Justin Herbert looks like the top 5 quarterback we believe he is. And I think that what we're waiting on is his playoff success, which we'll see. I think they'll obviously make the playoffs, judging by how they played in this last game. Next prediction over to the left there is the Raiders versus the Patriots. I also got this wrong. I said the Raiders were going to lose the Patriots. I thought the Patriots, I was like, yeah, Patriots going to come out, going to be a baller. Drake May, yeah, no. The Raiders just played well. I think they were well coached. I think they just played well. Some of these games I did not watch, so I am basing this a lot on what I have observed from just looking at the stats along with looking at some highlights. But the Raiders had some good plays. I think Brock Bowers looked good. Brock Bowers getting hurt did not help them, but Genty looked good in his first start. And I think that the Patriots just came out a little flat. Steelers-Jets was insane. When I saw Steelers-Jets playing each other, I said, that's going to be a low-scoring defensive game. You're gonna see someone win 9-6. They won 34-32. This was the highest scoring game outside of one. There was one other game that was higher scoring, but it was a very high scoring game for two teams that are not known for their high scores. These teams are both not known offensively. Aaron Rodgers threw 4 passing touchdowns. The last time he threw 4 passing touchdowns and no interceptions was back in 2021 when he was the MVP of the NFL. Aaron Rodgers, I don't believe, is getting back into MVP form, as some might say, but I genuinely do not believe that this man is going to be, I think he's going to be good, but this was a different Aaron Rodgers than Jets Aaron Rodgers, let me tell you. This man looked like Packers Aaron Rodgers. Not as mobile, but looked very good. Justin Fields played well. It was good to see Breece Hall got some work in. I think that it was an overall good game for both teams, and they were strong in both sense, but it was an interesting game. Yeah, that Miami pick looks bad. The Colts came out and smacked the Dolphins 33-8, I think. It was a rough game for the Dolphins. Tyreek Hill was crashing out on the sideline. I would not be surprised if we see in a couple of weeks Tyreek Hill requests a trade. I would not be surprised if that is a headline we see is Tyreek Hill requests a trade or Tyreek Hill traded. Very well could see that. Tyreek Hill is somewhat of a diva. I don't like calling him a diva, but he is very much so someone who wants to succeed, which it's a competitor. These NFL players are competitors. They want to win. And I think that Tyreek Hill right now is realizing that Miami might not be the place for him to win. So I would not be surprised if he starts to try to have those conversations about, hey, can I get traded? I want out of Miami. So, yeah, Colts looked very good. Daniel Jones looked exceptional for a quarterback who was cut from his team where he was drafted in the first round, bounced around to Minnesota, was a practice squad guy in Minnesota, to then get signed, beat out Anthony Richardson, the 4th overall draft pick, for the job and then proceed to put on a clinic against the Dolphins at home. It was a stellar first game for Daniel Jones. Do I think he'll maintain that? Who's to say? I think that I very well could see him continuing some success, but I don't know if it's going to be as prolonged. I think of guys like Josh Dobbs. I think of guys where they have a couple of good games as they're with a new team, but then people start to figure them out and they regress back to what they were. So that's some things I've observed or possibly could see being an outcome of this upcoming bit. But next to talk about is the Cardinals versus the Saints. Cardinals looked good. I think the Cardinals looked good. Will Johnson looked fantastic. The Cardinals, I think, hit a home run with their second-round draft pick in Will Johnson. I think that is going to be such a good situation. I think it is going to help solidify this secondary. Budda Baker had, I believe, 10 total tackles. Like, that secondary is going to be one of the strongest secondaries in the NFL, I believe. I truly believe that secondary is going to become one of the top secondaries in the NFL. And arguably, I don't think I'm bold in saying this, the top secondary in the NFC West. I rated them high. I think they're going to be the top secondary in the West. I think Jalen Thompson, I think Budda Baker, I think Max Melton, and I think Will Johnson are all going to make up the best secondary in the NFC West. And I know what some people are going to say. They're going to bring up the Seahawks. I'll talk about them a little later. The Saints looked not as bad as I was expecting. Spencer Rattler didn't play horribly, but I just think that they're just not as good as the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals are a very good team, and I think the Cardinals are going to be a very good team this season. So from that perspective, I don't know if I think the Saints performed better than I expected. I thought they were going to get smacked. They kept the game close. It was 20-13. So not the worst thing. Loved what I saw out of Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvin Harrison Jr. had a stellar catch on the sideline, and then he ended up getting a 13-yard touchdown reception. So from that perspective, I very much like what I saw out of the Cardinals. They're moving to a running back by committee situation with Trey Benson and James Conner. Trey Benson had a great run. James Conner had a catch for a touchdown pass. Like, I very well could see the Cardinals kind of coming into their own, which as I've mentioned, I've predicted. New York losing to Washington, not surprised. Brian Daboll would not confirm that Russell was going to be the starter in week 2. I think that with how that game went, we could be seeing the start of Jackson Dart era in New York City coming up. I think that we could very well see Jackson Dart. I could very well see Jackson Dart being the starter in this next week. It would not surprise me. He played well in the preseason, and I think that it's hard to sit on a guy that you drafted with the 27th pick in the first round, just being like, yeah, well, we should sit him, but if he's the better option, play the better option. Like, realistically, I don't see them sitting in a situation where they're like, yeah, we drafted you 27th overall. You're the better quarterback, but we're gonna play the veteran. Like, if the veteran was playing better or was making better decisions, I could see it, but I don't think Russell Wilson is that good. I don't think Russell Wilson is far from his Seattle self, and I think that is showing, and I think that that's what we're going to see. The Washington Commanders looked great. I think the Washington Commanders continue to take steps up. I think they developed. I think Deebo Samuel looked fantastic. He's having a renaissance. Like, this man was out of his mind. I think that we're going to see Washington's going to be a top team in the NFC. Absolutely, they're going to be a top team in the NFC. I think they might give the Eagles a run for their money for the NFC East title, but I think the Eagles are still the superior team. Next, I talk about the Carolina Panthers and the Jaguars. I was right about the Jaguars. They looked good out there against the Panthers. I think the Panthers, still a good team. I think Bryce Young's good. I think Ted McMillan showed some flashes. I think that it will be a good situation coming up. And I was right about that pick. So far, I'm not doing too terribly with my picks, but yeah. Next up is the Bengals versus the Browns. This prediction I got wrong. Well, not wrong. I said that they were going to blow them out. I thought their offense was going to be firing. I thought they were going to be the best offense. Like, I genuinely thought Joe Burrow was going to look like an MVP candidate. And then we'll talk about the Sunday night game, but I don't think he looked better than the guys that played on Sunday night. So my MVP pick is looking a little shaky, but it's the first game. We can't judge it all. I think Burrow will pick it up. I think their offense will pick it up. Otherwise, the Browns didn't look terrible. The defense was a shining moment for the Bengals, which is scary when you guys don't put money into your defense, and that is the thing that won you the game. The defense won them that game, not the offense, and I think that that's a scary thing when the offense takes up so much cap room for the Bengals. And then we're going to move on to the second quarter. As the clock runs out in the first. That's such an aggressive alarm. And then now we're running with the second quarter. We're going to talk about the Bucks Falcons. Bucks won. I was not able to watch much on this game or look at much on this game. So I can't really speak much on it outside of the Bucks did win. That's about it. I don't think there was much there that I was able to observe or watch. So yeah, but the Bucks won pretty well. I don't have as much conversation about that one. That game was not available for me to watch. Broncos, not Titans Buccaneers. Titans Broncos. Broncos won. I don't think Broncos looked as good as I was expecting them to against the Titans, as being that the Titans are in a younger team. And being that you have a rookie quarterback in Cam Ward, I think that Bo Nix looked good. I think he looked good. I don't know if they looked better than the Chargers. The Chargers looked so good against the Chiefs, and it's really hard to look good against the Chiefs when Mahomes is making his magic work. There were some plays that Mahomes made this is back on the Friday game. There are some plays Mahomes made that should not have worked. He threw a pass fully parallel to the ground and was caught by Juju Smith-Schuster for a first down. That's a terrible play and a terrible decision by any other quarterbacks without the last name Mahomes. So, but the AFC West is going to be a fun division to watch this year. The Raiders looked better than I expected. The Chargers looked better than I expected. Justin Herbert was playing out of his mind. Bo Nix looked good. The Chiefs looked all right. I would not be surprised if they try to trade for some form of receiver, just something to replace fill the Xavier Worthy hole. They still looked good. I think Marquise Hollywood Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster played well, but I think they're going to need some form of number one receiving threat, and so I wouldn't be surprised if they try to trade for something. Next up is the Niners Seahawks. This is a game I can talk really well about. Really defensive game. Brock looked good in moments and less good in others. I think that the Kittle getting hurt is going to be really interesting to see how that affects the Niners and how they approach games. Obviously, the game-winning catch was by their third-string tight end, who's a rookie. That is an impressive catch against Tyreek Woolen, who people were trying to tout as better than Sauce Gardner, and he isn't. I think that the other thing that this revealed to me is that the Seattle's secondary is not as good as people want to say it is. They're top secondary in the league. Tariq Woolen, but it just wasn't. It wasn't as good as I was expecting. Tariq Woolen specifically. That's what I can talk on. Is Tariq Woolen did not look good. He was not making plays that I think you'd expect out of a guy of his size, his stature, and his speed. When the game-winning catch, he doesn't attack the ball. He goes up to try to catch it, but he doesn't go forward towards it. He just kind of lets it fly, and as a result, the tight end for the Niners caught it and won them the game. And then you have Nick Bosa cause a forced fumble as the Seahawks drive to try to go win the game. And that sealed it. And I think that, Nick Bosa is an elite player. I think that he is so good, and I think that we saw the impact he had there when he forced that fumble. I think Sam Darnold isn't as good as some people thought he was after his Minnesota stint. I'm still not a Sam Darnold believer. I was a believer of him when he was at Minnesota, but I'm not a believer of him here at Seattle. And I also think that the running back room, Kenneth Walker did not look as good as I would have expected him to. I think Zach Charbonnet looked better than him, and that's sad because Charbonnet should not be the guy that you're going to when Kenneth Walker's been dealing with injuries, but he's been their like spark plug, their lightning plug. Like they put him in and they're like, this guy's going to get his yards, and he wasn't showing those flashes. Next is Lions Green Bay. Green Bay. My difficulty with this game is I cannot tell if the Lions I cannot tell if the Green Bay Packers are just that good of a football team or if the Lions are feeling the pain of losing Ben Johnson and their coordinators. I can't. I don't know what the answer to that question is, because I genuinely believe that we saw a great game out of the Green Bay defense and the Green Bay offense. I think both sides looked great. Micah Parsons got his first sack as a Packer, and the Micah Parsons effect was felt. You could see it throughout the entire team. When you bring in a guy of that caliber, it elevates everyone, and everyone was elevated in this game. And so as a result, you saw a huge improvement from the whole team. People were getting sacks that normally wouldn't get sacks just because they have to Parsons demands so much attention. And yeah, I think the Packers looked like a fantastic football team, but I don't know how much of that fantastic like performance was from them being on a fantastic football team or from the Lions really feeling the loss of Ben Johnson and the loss of their defensive coordinator. I can't answer those questions. I think we'll find out more in week 2. This is also week 1. Week 1 is one of those things where it's like there have been teams where they win week 1 in a dominant fashion and then do nothing the rest of the year. And then there's also teams that lose their first game by a lot and end up being a very solid team in the back half. All we have is 1 week's worth of evidence for the case for each of these teams being Super Bowl caliber. Next up is the Houston Texans versus the LA Rams. Puka Nacua is one of the toughest wide receivers in the NFL. My man got a head injury, bleeding out of his right eye. He played the game with like taped up eye. Like this guy, I am shocked at who he is. He's insane. He's such a tough player. Rams won. It was very, very good. Very, very close. I think Houston still looks good. I think Houston's a good team. I feel like they might have felt the Laramie Tunsil loss a bit, but otherwise, I think both teams are good teams. I think that this was just a good matchup, and it was good. But now we're going to get into the really, really good matchups of this week, which were the Sunday night game and the Monday night game. Both games were fantastic. The Baltimore Ravens versus the Buffalo Bills. Before Sunday night, teams with a 15-point lead and 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter were 277-0. They are now 277-1. Josh Allen might be the number 1 quarterback in the league. Because let me tell you, though, what I will say, Lamar did nothing wrong. Lamar played an outstanding game. And Derrick Henry, up until one play, outside of one play, he was the best player. He ran for 170 yards and 2 touchdowns. Since when could you blame a loss on a guy who ran 170 yards and 2 touchdowns? Well, he fumbled the ball in the worst possible moment. And that's not on him. The whole game can't be blamed on him. The defense of the Baltimore Ravens fell apart later in the game. But what I will say is Josh Allen's like that. Keon Coleman looked so much better than he did last year. Everyone was like, oh, Keon Coleman, he's this crazy guy. He's tall, he's fast, he's going to be great. And then he didn't show up last year. And then this year, he looks like a number 1 wide receiver. He looked great against the Baltimore defense. And let me tell you, Matt Prater kicked the game-winning field goal. He was not a Buffalo Bill until Thursday. He didn't even know his teammates' names. He probably knew the big guys like Deion Dawkins and Josh Allen and Matt Milano and like the big names, Joey Bosa. But I don't think he knew most of his teammates. And so I think it's just really interesting the fact that in the NFL, you can have a guy show up on Thursday night and kick a game-winning field goal on Sunday and be lifted up. And Josh Allen called out the Bills Mafia for leaving early. Because when you have Josh Allen on your team, the game is not lost until the quarters read 0-0. So, and then the next game, the Vikings versus the Bears. The Bears, First half, if I'd turned it off at first half, been like, the Bears are like that. The Bears are going to be a top team. They have a chance to win the North. They look so good. They look so good. And then J.J. McCarthy in the second half happened. J.J. McCarthy threw a pick six and then played lights out the rest of the night. And that's what you want to see in a rookie quarterback. You want to see a rookie quarterback go in, pop off out of his mind. Literally just go in, throw a pick, and it's like, shrugged it off, proceeded to go rush a touchdown, throw out of his mind, threw a touchdown, and it just, I cannot fathom what the Vikings have got now that I just saw J.J. McCarthy do what he did. It was better to see him respond positively than to crumble. And that's the second quarter. It's so aggressive. Quiet down. Okay, there we go. And now we're on halftime. Now, halftime, we are going to be talking. One second. Okay. And halftime is starting. We are going to be talking about Isaac Tesla, who is one of the wide receivers for the Detroit Lions. He had the catch of the week. Catch of the week, woo! Like, he had a catch that arguably, we're probably going to be looking back on it week 17 and be like, was that the catch of the year? Who knows? But this kid came out. He was a third-round draft pick out of Arkansas. And mind you, his journey throughout college and throughout the league is just insane. He's drafted third round by the Detroit Lions. He started at Hillsdale College. He worked his way to Arkansas in the transfer portal, played 2 years at Arkansas, got drafted 70th overall in the NFL draft to the Detroit Lions. He grew up a Detroit Lions fan. He grew up. There are photos of him wearing a Barry Sanders jersey with a helmet. There are photos of him in a hoodie. On his way to his pre-draft interview for the Lions, he was wearing a custom-made, custom-ordered NFL Lions Tesla jersey. This man then proceeds to ball out in the preseason to earn his spot. He earned his stripes. He's a very good player. He's a very good wide receiver. And he earned his stripes when he was playing preseason. And so everyone's like, cool, this is a great story. Awesome story. So impactful that he made the team. And then he proceeds to have the best catch. Obviously, it was later in the game. The Packers, we knew the Packers had won. But this catch, it's a one-handed grab over the defender. Insane concentration. You rarely see successful plays like that from a guy who's fourth in the depth chart. And he just balled out. One of the most impressive catches I've ever seen. I wish I could show it to you, but, copyright law exists, so I can't show you the Tesla catch because the NFL would sue me. I don't think they would actually sue me, but, don't want to risk it. So we're going to move on now because that's the story. Tesla, very awesome thing, very fun, heartwarming story, having this crazy play. And now the Lions are saying he's going to have an increased role, which they could use another guy from a receiving standpoint outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jamison Williams. I think they need a solid 3, and I think Tesla could do that. So that's going to be it for halftime. Uno momento. Okay. And we're going to move on to the third quarter. Look at that. New graphic this time. New graphic. And start the clock. We're now looking at my week 2 predictions. I'm going to focus on the left column first and then the right column in the fourth quarter. First game, we're talking Thursday Night Football. We have the Packers playing the Commanders. Looking at this matchup, I very well could see this being a shootout matchup with a lot of sacks. I think that this game is going to be a shootout of a game. I think there are going to be a lot of Jaden Daniels. How did he not get sacked there? Just because I think that the Green Bay has a great rush, but I don't think their secondary is as strong as it could be. And I also think that Washington does not necessarily have the defense to compete with the offense of the Packers. But all in all, I think it's going to be a great matchup. I think the Packers are going to win. I think it's going to be a close game. Very well could see it being a 35-28 kind of game. Like, very well could see it being a game that goes into the high scores. But all in all, I think they're going to be a very good team. Jordan Love looked good, very good against the Detroit Lions, was making the right reads, was throwing the right, was placing the ball in the right spots, and I think it's exciting to see as someone. I'm not a Packers fan, but I know Packers fans. I know a lot of Packers fans, and I think this Micah Parsons trade is going to be one of the things that goes down in history as like that was the right trade. Because when you look at it, when the Packers want to go and succeed, they trade for a edge rusher because they did the same thing with the Minister of Defense, Reggie White, back in the day. But I also don't think the Commanders are going to lose because they're a bad football team. I just think they're going to lose because I think the Packers are a better football team. So now moving down to the Bengals versus the Jaguars. I have the Bengals winning this. I think that their game against the Browns was a punch in the mouth. I think Joe Burrow, as a competitor, as who he is as a person, is going to look at that game and be like, that was not okay. That was not a game that represents who we are as the Bengals. And I very well could see him showing up and just slinging it and putting it to a point where he scores 4 or 5 touchdowns against this Jaguars secondary. I very well could see that. I also think the Jags offense is going to have some crazy plays. I think that they had Travis Etienne had a great run last week. I think that they're going to have a very, very solid game against the Bengals. I think it's going to be, this one more specifically is going to be a shootout because I don't think their two defenses are as good, and I think their offenses are their strong points. And I think we're going to see that with Brian Thomas Jr. and Trevor Lawrence, and I think you're going to see T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow is going to throw for 350, 400 yards in this next game. I don't see that out of the possibility. I think he goes for 350 yards and 4 passing touchdowns. I think he's going to spread the love a little. I think 2 to Jamar. I think 1 to T. Higgins. And I think 1 will go to some other player, probably Chase Brown. But I think he's going to spread the love. I think that offense is going to come out and be playing out of their mind. Next up is Lions versus the Bears. The Bears left a lot to be desired watching their game against the Vikings. They came out and in the first half looked like one of the best teams in football. They looked great. They had a pick 6. Their defense looked fantastic. I think that they are a team that truly was showing a lot of success and a lot of just determination. And they were like, let's do it. Let's go. Fire. And then the second half came and they fell apart. And it doesn't make sense somewhat for their fall apart, and it makes me worry about Caleb Williams as a whole. Caleb Williams is 0-3 against his draft class. He had never played against J.J. McCarthy. He's lost to Bo Nix, and he's lost to Jaden Daniels. And now he has lost to J.J. McCarthy. He's 0-3 against his draft class, which is not the best look when you were the number 1 overall pick and supposed to be generational. So, but I think the Lions will win. I think that Jared Goff, I think this team will come back and be like, we're not that kind of football team, because they're a grit team. We know that. Dan Campbell has always spoken about grit. They're football players. They're gonna come out. They're gonna play ball. They're gonna work their butts off. They're gonna outwork you. They're gonna outgrind you. They're gonna outgrit you. And I don't think the Bears are a team that's like we're gonna outgrit them. They're a team that maybe a couple of trick plays might work, but the hard thing is that the offense was so vanilla for the Lions. You see the loss in Ben Johnson, and I think that it's going to be really interesting to see Ben Johnson as a head coach against the Lions and see how much that impacts it. But yeah, there was a lot of unique play design that Ben Johnson had. We saw that, and I think it was very interesting. You saw that with they had I think it was a 2-point conversion play at the very end of the game, and they had Luther Burton come out in a little sweep. Caleb Williams fakes it, and it got DJ Moore wide open in the back of the end zone. It was for a touchdown. Just had him wide open in the back of the end zone. It was just a very, very good play. But Ben Johnson is a genius play design-wise, and I think the Lions are really feeling the loss of his play design and his offensive genius. Next game, Niners beating the Saints. I think there have been talks about Purdy being questionable because of his toe. He hurt his toe against the Seahawks, and toe injuries are no fun. They are some of the worst ones because You think, oh, a toe injury, that's fine. No, it's not, because everything you do involves your toes. You don't realize it as a football player until you hurt your toe or hurt the top of your foot or something, and you just are like, I this hurts. This is terrible. So hopefully Brock Purdy's healthy. If Brock Purdy's healthy, I think I think it's clear. I think they'll beat the Saints. I think the Saints defense is not going to be able to handle the offense from Kyle Shanahan. I think that the defense for the Niners look all right. I think that pass rush looks good. Fred Warner's still one of the top linebackers in the NFL. So otherwise, I'm pretty high on the Niners beating the Saints here. Saints, I genuinely think that you guys are just tanking for a Drew Aller. And I don't feel ashamed in saying that. Next up is Seahawks versus the Steelers. If the Steelers play like they did against the Jets and the Seahawks play again like they did against the Niners, the Steelers are going to win handedly. I think that if Rodgers shows up and throws 4 touchdown passes again, and the defense comes out with a vengeance against Sam Darnold, because that O-line could not handle Nick Bosa very well, and let me tell you who's arguably better than Nick Bosa. My boy TJ Watt, one of the Watt brothers. He's one of the top paid players in the NFL. I think TJ Watt is one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. I think he's better than Nick Bosa, and Nick Bosa was giving a lot of problems to Sam Darnold and that Seahawks O-line. And as a result of that, I think that we're going to see a very dominant game from the Steelers defense, and their offense, if they show up like they did this week, are going to run through the Seahawks in this next week's matchup. Next up is the Panthers versus the Cardinals. I put the Cardinals winning because I think they are the better team. I think they are the superior team. I think that they are going to win this. And judging by how the Jags played against the Panthers and the result of that game, I very well could see the Cardinals winning by a large amount. However, what I will say is that the Cardinals have this kryptonite that is the Carolina Panthers. It doesn't matter how good the team is. It doesn't matter how bad the Panthers are. For some reason, the Cardinals struggled to beat the Panthers a lot. I think they finally shake it, but that is one of the picks I'm a little less confident in, just because I know how the Cardinals have shown up in the past against the Panthers, like last year and even 2 years before. Eagles versus Chiefs. I think the Eagles win. I think the Chiefs didn't show me enough to make me like, yeah, they're a good team. And I think the Eagles are going to be one of the best teams in football. I think the Chiefs, though you have Patrick Mahomes, I don't think that defense is going to be able to handle the rushing attack from Barkley and Hurts. And I think that if they're like, oh, we're going to shut down the run, I think A.J. Brown's going to have a better game than he did last week. I think that he's going to demand the targets. But genuinely, I think that we are going to see a game where Hurts airs it out, because I think that Chris Jones and that D-line from the Chiefs is going to try to shut down the run as best they can, but I think the Eagles win this. And then Monday Night Football, one of the Monday Night Football games, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Houston Texans. I have Tampa Bay winning. I like Baker Mayfield. I like Mike Evans. I like Chris Godwin. I like Bucky Irving. I really like the offense for the Buccaneers. I don't know as much about their defense. I think that if this game comes out to a shootout where it's just, hey, score, I think Buccaneers are a bit more of a high-powered offense than the Texans. Texans are great, though. They have Nico Collins. They have Joe Mixon. They have C.J. Stroud. Like that. That's nothing. It's not nothing to sneeze at. But I think that the Buccaneers are going to win this game. Off vibes alone. That sounds terrible, but vibes. Okay, we're gonna move into the fourth quarter. Put the fours up, and let's move ourselves to the fourth quarter and start the clock. Okay, now on to the other side of the board. First off, Browns versus Ravens. Ravens win. The Ravens played one of the other best teams in football and put up 40 points against a team with a solid defense and played against a very strong offense. I think the Ravens defense is going to shut the Browns offense down to a staggering halt. There will be next to no movement. And then I think Derrick Henry is going to run for another 100-yard football game, and Lamar Jackson is going to have another great passing and rushing game. I think that the Ravens are going to play as well as they did against the Bills, and what we're going to see is how good the Bills are, because we're going to see how badly the Browns get blown out. So yeah, I think it's Ravens by a more than a mile. I think it's a 5K. I think the Ravens win by a 5K. Eagles versus the Cowboys. I think if not the Eagles versus Cowboys, the Giants versus the Cowboys. My apologies. The Giants versus the Cowboys. With the Giants and how they performed in last week's game, I picked them to lose. I picked the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys came out and had a much better offense than anyone was expecting. I think that we're going to see a lot out of the Giants, not the Giants, the Cowboys and their offense. I think we're going to continue to see a lot more progress from this Cowboys team. They looked very good, especially without Micah Parsons against the Eagles. That lightning leg just really hurt them. I think the Giants, if they come out with Russell Wilson, are going to get smacked in this game. I think if they come out with Jackson Dart, that's enough of a question mark to possibly get a freak win. But I think if I'm going with the information I have, which is Russell Wilson is going to be the starter in this next week's game, I pick the Cowboys. Though understand there is a strong rush game from the Giants, and also Cam Skattebo looked like Mike Allstott. That man could not be brought down, and these are grown men in the NFL, and they were struggling to tackle him. Skattebo is quite an impressive back. But next, Patriots versus the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins were clearly the worst team when you look at the matchups between the previous week when the Raiders played the Patriots. I think the Patriots still put up points and still were a successful team. Their defense looked all right, but I think the Raiders were just a better team at that point. And the Dolphins looked worse. I think the Dolphins are going to really struggle this season. I think Tua is continuing to regress. I think Tua's going to, this is probably Tua's last year in Miami. I think this is Tyreek's last year in Miami. Waddle, I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to leave. I think that the Dolphins are in a very bad spot. And I think Mike McDaniels is going to be in a little bit of hot water. I do believe that. I think he's going to be in a rough spot come what would that be? January. Yeah, but I think the Patriots are going to win. I think Mike Vrabel's the better coach. I think the defense is going to come back, and I think Drake May is going to have his coming out. Drake May played a good game last week. Game didn't fall the way he wanted. Next up, Bills versus Jets. Bills are one of the best teams in football. They are top 3. I think the top 3 right now are probably Eagles, Ravens, and Bills. I think the Bills looked fantastic. I think Josh Allen, that is the hard thing, is that team is so dependent on Josh Allen that it worries me, but also it shows that guy is going to win you games, and I don't think the Jets are going to be able to handle that offense and that defense, and it'll be a closer game than I would have expected, maybe predicting it last week. But this week, I think the Jets looked better. I think the Jets are going to be a much more competitive team than I expected. They're going to be better than the Dolphins, which was not what I expected. But who knows? Still the first week of football. But Justin Fields looked very good, and I think that it'll be interesting to see how that game plays out. But I do have the Bills in that matchup. Next is the Rams versus the Titans. Rams are coached by Sean McVay. Stafford, Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, and Devontae Adams. I think that offense is such a high-powered offense against the Titans, who, though they're a good team, are not necessarily high-powered. Tony Pollard is an all-right back. Calvin Ridley, you have Tyler Lockett. You have a somewhat decent offense with Cam Ward being on the helm, but I don't think their defense is there. And I think that the Rams have a very good defense. I think they have a very, very solid defense. I think they have a very good pass rush, which I think is going to get at Cam Ward, and I think could maybe shake him a little bit as a young quarterback who's learning how to perform when it matters, when you're playing against the teams that are really tough, when you're playing against guys like Jared Verse, who's a defensive rookie of the year. So very well could see the Rams running away with this game, but it also could be a much closer game than I expect, just because I think Cam Ward might have a little bit of a fire lit under him after this past loss. Next is going to be Broncos and Colts. I do have the Colts losing this game, not out of them not being good, but I think the Broncos are going to be a very, very good team. I think they looked very good. I think Bo Nix looked very good. I could very well see this team being a very successful team. And I think the Colts are, though they were good, I don't think they're going to be as much of a consistent team is the right wording. Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, and Daniel Jones is a good combination, but I think they're going to lack consistency this year compared to the Broncos. I think the Broncos are going to be pretty even keel. Bo Nix figured out figured out how to play in the NFL. And once he figured that out after the first 5 games, and Sean Payton knew how to give him the right stuff, I think they've been a very good team. And also, those additions with Talanoa Hufanga and Dre Greenlock did definitely help the Broncos in this process. Next up is going to be the Sunday night football match between Michael Penix Jr. and J.J. McCarthy. And by that, I mean the Falcons versus the Vikings. The Vikings I have winning this matchup just because I think J.J. McCarthy looked like that. Like he looked very, very good. I think that the Vikings looked very strong. I think Kevin O'Connell is a fantastic coach. The fact that they were down by as much as they were and able to respond and not react, but respond in a way that was effective and moving and motivating makes me very high on the Vikings. What player do you see throw a pick 6 and then proceed to lead his team to 164 yards in the fourth quarter? Not many teams is what I'll tell you. There's really maybe only two quarterbacks right now that I can think of that would do that, and it would be pretty easy. And those are the top 2 quarterbacks in the league right now, Lamar and Allen. Sorry, I was about to say Mahomes. Mahomes also could do that. But he looked like a pro, a vet. He looked like a guy who has been through this before. It's another day in the office. Falcons looked good. Falcons looked good in their last matchup against the Bucs. I think their offense looked good. I think Pitts got used more than I expected. Bijan had a fantastic run. I think he had a 50-yard rushing touchdown. So I think that this is going to be a very high-powered offense kind of situation, but I think it's exciting. I think it'll be a fun matchup. Drake London. I think it'll be a very, very good Sunday night matchup. High scoring. I don't know if it'll be as much of a classic as this week's Sunday Night Football, which was... I can't get over how good that Sunday Night Football game was, guys. Like, it might have been the best Sunday Night Football game I have ever witnessed. So, but Falcons, not by lack of trying, I have the Vikings winning that matchup. And then the Chargers against the Raiders. Now, Raiders obviously looked good against the Patriots. I don't think the Patriots are as good as the Chargers. I think the Chargers are going to be a team that is going to be scary this year. I think Justin Herbert, who has been talked about as a top 5 quarterback. People are like, he's a top 5 quarterback. He's a top 5 quarterback. He's a top 5 quarterback. But he hasn't shown it when it matters. But then this game, he goes to Sao Paulo, Brazil, and this man lights it up on prime time against the Chiefs. I might buy into it. I might think that Justin Fields is a top 5 Justin Herbert's a top 5 quarterback. And I clearly do, because I have them winning this matchup against the Raiders. I think the Raiders are a great team. I think they won their last game. Both these teams are undefeated. But I think when it comes to the competition that they played, the Chiefs are a better team than the Patriots. And with the way that the Chargers played and the way that they performed, I very well can see the Chargers winning this game against the Raiders in a pretty well-handled manner. So yeah, that's my predictions for week 2 coming up, and it's exciting. I'm very excited for this next week. There's going to be some fantastic matchups. There's really going to be some really tough, close games, and I think we're going to learn a lot more about some teams when it comes to who they play. And that's the end of the Game Clock. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching this week's episode of Game Clock, your new favorite sports show. I'm your host, Michael Pales, and we'll see you next time on Game Clock. Have a good evening, and goodbye.